There's a kind of silence that doesn't just hurt. It rearranges your entire inner world. Not because they screamed, not because they slammed a door, not because they told you they never cared, but because one day the warmth shifted, the messages slowed, the eyes that once lingered started pulling away too fast. The closeness became careful, then strange, then thin. And you were left standing in the invisible aftermath of something you couldn't even name. That is the kind of pain that keeps people awake at 2 a.m. Because when someone is cold, you know where you stand. When someone is cruel, the wound is clean. But when someone feels deeply connected to you and still pulls away, your mind begins to eat itself alive. You replay every word, every pause, every glance. You start asking questions that don't have answers. Did I imagine it? Did they lose feelings? Did I become too much? Or worse, did I finally matter enough to scare them? Because this is the truth almost nobody tells you about avoidant people. The deeper the feeling, the stronger the reflex to escape. And if you don't understand that, you will spend months chasing clarity from someone whose entire nervous system is built to run from emotional intensity the moment it starts feeling real. That is the brutal truth. The more special you are, the more confusing their behavior can become. Not less, more. Because when an avoidant meets someone ordinary, someone who doesn't touch the deeper layers, they can stay calm, they can stay charming, available enough, even consistent for a while. There is no real threat in surface-level attachment, no danger in being liked if their autonomy is untouched, no panic in connection if it remains manageable, if it stays light, if it asks for nothing sacred. But when they meet someone who gets under their skin, everything changes. Not always on the outside first. On the outside, it may just look like hesitation, delay, mixed signals, a strange hot and cold rhythm that makes no logical sense. One moment they're opening up in ways they never do. The next they're distant, vague, hard to reach. They lean in, then vanish. They create intimacy, then act overwhelmed by the very intimacy they created. It feels contradictory, because it is, but not emotionally, neurologically. For an avoidant person, deep attachment doesn't simply feel romantic. It can feel destabilizing. Their body can read closeness the way other people read danger. The nervous system does not always care whether something is good. It cares whether something is familiar. And for someone wired around emotional self-protection, real closeness can trigger the same alarm system as a threat. The amygdala lights up. Stress chemicals begin to rise. Cortisol starts preparing the body not for love, but for distance. And the mind, desperate to regulate itself, starts creating stories that justify withdrawal. Maybe this is moving too fast. Maybe something is off. Maybe I need space. Maybe they expect too much. Maybe I'm losing myself. And that's the part that breaks your heart. Because while you were leaning closer, thinking connection was building, they may have been fighting an internal flood you never got to see. A flood of sensation, vulnerability, pressure, need, exposure, desire, hope. The terrifying possibility of being known deeply enough to be affected. And avoidants do not fear caring too little. They fear caring too much. That is why one of the clearest signs you are not casual to them is not always effortless pursuit. Sometimes it is disruption. You disrupt their emotional equilibrium. You stay in their mind longer than they want you to. Your absence feels louder. Your presence reaches places they've spent years sealing off. They start thinking about what you meant, what you saw, what you awakened. And instead of relaxing into that, they tighten, they detach, they go quiet. Not because nothing is there, but because too much is there. This is where so many people break themselves trying to be chosen. They think if they explain better, love harder, stay softer, become more understanding, more patient, more available, then the avoidant will finally feel safe enough to stay. But sometimes all that does is intensify the imbalance. Because if you keep moving towards someone who is already overwhelmed by what they feel, your pursuit becomes proof of pressure. Even if your intention is love, even if your heart is pure, their system doesn't translate it as devotion. It translates it as demand. And the more demanded they feel, the more distance they need to recover a sense of control. So the tragedy begins. You reach because you care. They retreat because they care. And both people misread the other. You think if they cared, they would come closer. They think, if I come closer, I might disappear into this. This is why silence becomes such a powerful concept in these dynamics. Not game-playing silence, not punishment, not calculated absence, but regulated silence, dignified silence, the kind that is not empty, but full of self-respect. Because when you stop reacting to every withdrawal as if it is a verdict on your worth, something profound begins to shift. Inside you first, then inside them. An avoidant is deeply used to one pattern. They pull away, and the other person panics. Texts multiply, energy chases, explanations pour out, emotion becomes loud. And in that moment, the avoidant gets two things confirmed at once. First, closeness leads to pressure. Second, they still hold the power to destabilize the bond without having to fully face their own feelings. But when your energy changes, when the silence that follows their distance is not hostile, but grounded, not begging, but complete, something unfamiliar happens inside them. The dopamine loop gets interrupted, because now there is no immediate reassurance, no emotional noise to drown out their own internal world. No easy way to regulate by keeping you in a reactive orbit around them. Now they have to feel you. And that is when the special one becomes unforgettable. Not when you chase harder, when you stop translating their confusion into your collapse. Imagine their mind in the days after. At first, they tell themselves the usual story. This is probably for the best. I needed space anyway. Things were getting intense. I don't want drama. I don't want obligation. I don't want to lose myself. But then something starts happening in the quiet. They check their phone more than they mean to. They wonder why you aren't reaching. They remember the tone in your voice, the softness you carried without forcing anything. They replay the moment you really saw them, not the persona, not the polished distance. Them. The frightened, divided, emotionally over-controlled self they rarely let anyone touch. And because you are not there filling the silence starts speaking. It tells them that you were different. It tells them your presence regulated more than they admitted. It tells them the peace they thought they were reclaiming may actually be emptiness. That is when missing you stops being theoretical. It becomes physiological. The body remembers connection. The nervous system remembers co-regulation, even when the mind insists on independence. They may have pushed you away to lower the intensity, but once you're gone, the dopamine attached to your presence drops, and the emotional numbness they call safety starts feeling flat, lifeless. They don't always call it grief. Avoidants are masters of renaming pain. They call it needing distraction, restlessness, irritation, boredom, a weird mood they can't explain. But beneath the label is the same thing: withdrawal from you. And this is where the power dynamic begins to turn. Not because you manipulated it, but because reality has space to work. When you are no longer over-functioning for the connection, they are left alone with the emotional consequences of under-functioning in it. Then the mind gets busy. What if I misread this? What if they were actually safe? What if I let go of the one person who didn't try to control me? What if I don't find that kind of connection again? What if they're moving on? That last thought hits hardest, because avoidants often don't fully process the value of a bond while they still have access to it. Distance creates perspective. Loss creates definition. The thing they pushed away while overwhelmed suddenly becomes clear when it is no longer available on demand. And that clarity can become obsession. Quiet obsession, maybe. Private obsession. The kind that doesn't always show up with dramatic declarations, but with hovering. Watching your stories, revisiting old messages, sudden check-ins that feel strangely casual for how loaded they really are. Indirect curiosity, emotional testing, little openings disguised as nothing. Hey, just thought of you. Hope you're doing well. Saw something that reminded me of you. Small messages, light tone, hidden ache. Because they want contact without exposure. They want reassurance without surrender. They want to know whether the bridge still exists without having to admit how much it matters that it does. And if you were the special one, the one who reached their deeper emotional architecture, this inner conflict can become relentless. They may try to distract themselves with work, routines, new people, surface-level conversation, anything to avoid dropping into the depth of what they feel. But the body keeps score. The mind circles back. Your absence becomes textured, specific, personal. Not everyone leaves a mark. You did. That is the difference. The special one is not always the person they treated best in the moment. Sometimes it is the person they felt most with, and therefore defended against the hardest. That is painful to hear if you loved them, because part of you wants love to look like immediate presence, emotional bravery, clear choosing. And yes, healthy love should become that. But psychologically, especially with avoidant patterns, the first sign of depth is often not stability. It is destabilization. Not because you were wrong for them, because you were real to them. And real is what their defenses were built to survive. But here is the warning. This is the moment many people ruin the shift. The avoidant circles back, sends the small message, opens the little door, shows the trace of missing. And because you have been starving for proof, you rush emotionally back into the same role that exhausted your soul the first time. You overgive, over-explain, overread, overhope. You collapse the mystery. You abandon your center. You hand them immediate access to the version of you who will tolerate confusion, just to feel chosen for one more second. And the pattern resets. Because nothing forces transformation like consequence. If they can return without accountability, they return as the same person. If they can touch your energy without respecting your heart, they learn nothing. If your self-worth disappears the moment they reappear, then their temporary longing never has to become deeper emotional maturity. This is why your silence cannot just be external. It has to be internal. You have to stop negotiating against your own value in the privacy of your mind. You have to stop treating crumbs like chemistry. You have to stop calling anxiety intuition. You have to stop romanticizing emotional unavailability just because the connection felt profound. Yes, they may think you are the special one. Yes, they may miss you in ways they barely understand. Yes, your absence may shake them. But none of that means you are meant to keep bleeding to prove your significance. Their internal struggle is not your invitation to self-abandon. Read that again in your bones. Because the deepest shift in this entire dynamic is not when they start chasing. It's when you no longer need them to. That is the part that changes your face, your energy, your choices, your life. When you stop measuring your value by whether someone emotionally defended chooses to transcend their fear. When you stop standing outside someone's locked inner world, offering your tenderness like a sacrifice to a door that only opens from the inside. That is when your power returns. And power here does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean punishing them. It does not mean withholding love to control the outcome. It means becoming unavailable for dynamics that require your pain to function. It means understanding that being unforgettable is not the same as being honored. It means recognizing that someone can feel deeply for you and still be unable to love you well. That truth can sting, but it can also set you free. Because once you truly accept it, you stop trying to decode every silence as if it contains your destiny. You stop turning their ambivalence into your life's central mystery. You stop waiting in the hallway of someone else's emotional paralysis, hoping the next footstep is finally certainty. You become certainty. In your body, in your standards, in your pacing, in your refusal to call confusion a soulmate bond just because it cracked you open. And this is the paradox avoidants often cannot ignore. The moment you stop orbiting them, they feel the gravity of what they lost. Not because you performed detachment better than they did, but because you became whole without their permission. That is what haunts them. Not your pleading, not your availability, your wholeness, your grounded absence, your decision to let reality speak louder than potential. Because deep down, the avoidant does not just fear closeness. They fear meeting someone whose love exposes how disconnected they have become from themselves. And when they lose someone like that, someone who felt like home and truth and danger all at once, the loss doesn't always explode outward. Sometimes it sinks inward, quietly, permanently. They compare others to you. They notice what is missing. They remember how seen they felt, how calm you were, how safe your energy could have been if they had been able to stay. And maybe one day they come back, more clearly, more honestly, more ready to face what they once escaped. That happens sometimes. People do change when pain finally becomes greater than protection. But that cannot be the center of your story. You are. You have to be. Because the final lesson here is not about how to make an avoidant realize your value. It is about realizing that your value was never waiting inside their realization. It existed before they understood it, before they ran from it, before they missed it, before they named you special too late. And the moment you embody that, truly embody it, something inside you becomes unshakable. Your nervous system stops outsourcing safety to inconsistent people. Your heart becomes discerning instead of desperate. Your love becomes powerful because it is no longer bargaining to be returned. You no longer beg to be chosen by those who are frightened by depth. You choose yourself with such quiet finality that anyone who wants access to you has to meet you in truth. That is the identity shift. Not, how do I get them back? But, why was I ever willing to lose myself for someone who could feel everything and still offer so little? That question changes people, because it wakes up the part of you that has been asleep under longing. The part that knows you were never hard to love, just hard to hold if someone was committed to emotional hiding. So if they pulled away after something real, if they grew cold after closeness, if they vanished right when the bond was deepening, don't be too quick to assume you meant nothing. Sometimes that reaction means the opposite. Sometimes it means you touched the most defended part of them. Sometimes it means they felt too much. Sometimes it means you were the one they could not neatly categorize, casually enjoy, or lightly forget. Sometimes it means you were the special one. But your job is not to build your life around being unforgettable to someone unavailable. Your job is to become unforgettable to yourself, to return to your own body, to trust what peace feels like, to stop chasing people who confuse being overwhelmed with being incapable, and expecting you to pay the emotional bill for both. Let them do whatever they do with their fear. Let them sit with the silence they created. Let them wonder. Let them miss. Let them finally feel the shape of your absence, without your help translating it for them. And you rise. Not dramatically, not loudly, just fully. You stop shrinking your worth to fit inside someone else's limited capacity. You stop calling emotional starvation love. You stop abandoning your center every time someone mysterious makes your nervous system ache. And in that stillness, in that return, in that quiet but irreversible reclamation, you become the one person no one can take from you again.